The elderly black woman quietly emptied the trash can beside the conference room. Nobody looked up. Nobody said thank you. And nobody imagined that she owned the building they were standing in. If they had known the truth, the entire office would have treated her differently. But Evelyn Brooks preferred it that way, at least for now. Every morning, before most employees arrived, Evelyn stepped through the glass doors carrying the same worn cleaning cart she had pushed for nearly 3 decades. The security guards knew her. The maintenance crew knew her. A few receptionists remembered her birthday. Beyond that, she was almost invisible. Interesting. Not because people disliked her. Because people rarely notice those they see every day, especially the ones cleaning up after them. Chicago's winter wind rattled the windows as Evelyn moved down the hallway. 68 years old. A little slower than she used to be. Still steady. Still reliable. Still arriving before sunrise. The building contained 27 floors. Law firms. Consulting companies. Financial firms. Executives earning 6-figure salaries. Young professionals chasing promotions. People constantly rushing somewhere. Most never noticed the woman quietly keeping everything spotless. And Evelyn never seemed bothered by it. She greeted everyone with the same warm smile. The same gentle voice. The same simple kindness. Morning, sweetheart. Good luck with your presentation. Tell your son happy birthday for me. Small things. Yet somehow Evelyn remembered details nobody else did. Names. Families. Important dates. Even favorite coffee orders. The remarkable part? Most people couldn't have told you anything about her. Not even her last name. That morning, a young financial analyst named Ryan Walker hurried into the elevator carrying 2 phones and a laptop bag. 26 years old. Ambitious. Smart. And completely convinced the world revolved around his schedule. He stepped into the elevator just as Evelyn rolled her cleaning cart toward the doors. The cart slowed his path by perhaps 2 seconds. Maybe 3. That was enough. Ryan sighed dramatically, then shook his head. Seriously? Evelyn stopped. Immediately. I'm sorry, honey. Ryan muttered something under his breath. Something rude. Something unnecessary. The elevator doors closed before anyone could respond. Evelyn simply smiled and continued working. Interesting. Because age teaches lessons pride often ignores. Across the lobby, an older security guard named Frank watched the exchange. He frowned. Kids shouldn't talk to you like that. Evelyn shrugged. He'll learn. The answer surprised Frank. It always did. Most people carried resentment. Evelyn carried patience. The difference mattered. Hours passed. Employees filled the building. Meetings started. Phones rang. Deadlines approached. And like every other day, Evelyn quietly moved through the background. Refilling supplies. Collecting trash. Straightening chairs. Making life easier for people who rarely noticed. Around noon, she entered a break room on the 15th floor. The scene looked familiar. Coffee spilled across the counter. Napkins everywhere. Half-eaten food abandoned on tables. Someone had even left an entire lunch tray behind. Evelyn sighed softly. Not angrily. Just tired. As she began cleaning, 2 employees walked in. Neither acknowledged her. One grabbed a drink from the refrigerator. The other laughed. Doesn't matter. He pointed toward the mess. That's what maintenance is for. The words weren't meant to be cruel. That almost made them worse. Interesting. Because disrespect often arrives disguised as indifference. Evelyn continued wiping the counter. No reaction. No complaint. No confrontation. The employees left moments later. The room became quiet again. Sunlight streamed through the windows overlooking downtown Chicago. For a brief moment, Evelyn stood still, looking out at the city. Thousands of buildings. Millions of people. Countless stories. She had spent 30 years inside this one tower. Longer than many employees had been alive. Long enough to watch interns become executives. Long enough to watch companies rise and fall. Long enough to know things nobody suspected. A soft smile touched her face. Then she returned to work. That afternoon, something unusual happened. A company-wide email appeared in every inbox. Mandatory all-hands meeting. Friday morning. Attendance required. No explanation provided. The building immediately exploded with speculation. People love mysteries, especially in offices. Some predicted layoffs. Others expected a merger. A few believed the CEO was retiring. Everyone had a theory. Nobody had the answer. Nobody except a handful of people on the top floor. And Evelyn. Interesting. Very few employees noticed that she received the same email. Even fewer noticed the faint smile that appeared when she read it. Meanwhile, Ryan Walker's day continued getting worse. A client presentation failed. His supervisor criticized him. A deal he expected to close fell apart. By 5 o'clock, frustration followed him everywhere. Then came the final irritation. As he exited a conference room, he nearly collided with Evelyn's cleaning cart again. This time he didn't stop himself. Maybe try staying out of the way. The hallway fell silent. A few nearby employees looked uncomfortable. Ryan didn't notice. Evelyn looked up at him. Her eyes calm. Her expression kind. No anger. No embarrassment. Nothing except patience. Then she gave the same answer she always seemed to have. Have a good evening, son. Ryan rolled his eyes and walked away. Several people shook their heads. One employee started to apologize on his behalf. Evelyn simply waved it off. No harm done. At least that's what everyone thought. What nobody realized was that in less than 48 hours, the entire building would learn exactly who Evelyn Brooks was. And Ryan Walker would remember that hallway conversation for the rest of his life. Ryan Walker forgot about the incident before he even reached the parking garage. Evelyn Brooks didn't. Not because she was offended. Because she was worried. There was a difference. A big one. Interesting. Most people assume kindness comes naturally. It doesn't. Patience requires effort. Grace requires discipline. And forgiveness becomes harder every year the world teaches you not to offer it. The next morning, Evelyn arrived before sunrise. As usual, the streets of downtown Chicago remained dark. The city still half asleep. Inside the tower, only a handful of lights glowed behind office windows. Frank, the security guard, greeted her with a smile. Morning, Evelyn. Morning, Frank. He held the door open, the same way he had done for years. One small act of respect. One small act she never forgot. That was another thing people didn't know about Evelyn. She remembered everything. Not in a bitter way. In a grateful one. People often remembered insults. Evelyn remembered kindness. The elevator carried her to the 26th floor. One of the law firms leased nearly the entire level. By 8 o'clock, attorneys would fill every office. For now, the hallways remained quiet. She worked methodically, replacing supplies, dusting desks, straightening chairs, a routine she could perform almost with her eyes closed. 30 years teaches a person a few things, and one of them is rhythm. Interesting, because some people spend their lives chasing bigger opportunities. Evelyn spent hers creating consistency. The building changed. Companies came and went. CEOs retired. Markets crashed. Technology transformed everything. Yet every morning, Evelyn arrived. Reliable, steady, present. Around 7:30, a young woman entered carrying a stack of files. Nervous, clearly new. Evelyn recognized the look immediately. First day, the young employee nearly dropped everything while trying to badge through a secured door. Evelyn reached out and steadied the stack. There you go, sweetheart. The woman laughed nervously. Thanks. Then paused. I've never been this scared on a first day. Evelyn smiled. You'll be fine. The answer sounded simple, yet somehow reassuring. A few minutes later, the woman returned. How do you know that? Evelyn chuckled. Because I've watched hundreds of first days. The employee laughed, then hurried off. Neither realized they would meet again very soon. Very differently. The morning continued. On the 12th floor, Evelyn stopped near a break room. Inside sat a young intern. Head lowered, shoulders tense. The boy stared at a vending machine, then checked his wallet, then checked it again. The machine remained stubbornly expensive. Evelyn knew that look too. Years ago, she'd seen it on her own son. Back when life had been harder. Back before college. Back before opportunities arrived. Without saying anything, she placed a few dollars beside the machine. The intern looked confused. Evelyn. She waved him off. Get yourself some lunch. His face reddened. I'll pay you back. No rush. The answer came easily, because she never expected repayment. Interesting. Some people help because they expect gratitude. Others help because they remember what it felt like to need it. At noon, Evelyn ate lunch alone near a window overlooking the river. A turkey sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. Nothing special. She preferred simple things. Always had. Across the city stood some of Chicago's most valuable real estate. Towering buildings, luxury developments, corporate headquarters, billions of dollars. Yet none of them seemed particularly important in that moment. The view made her think about her husband, Daniel Brooks. Gone for 12 years now. Still missed every day. A gentle sadness settled over her face. Not painful, just familiar. People often assume grief fades. It doesn't. It simply learns how to live beside you. Interesting, because love leaves echoes. Even decades later, Evelyn reached into her purse, removed a small photograph. Daniel stood smiling beside her. Much younger, much happier. The picture had been taken outside this very building, long before anyone considered it valuable, long before anyone imagined what it would become. She touched the frame softly, then returned it to her purse. A few minutes later, her phone vibrated. A text message. Short. Simple. Tomorrow. 8 a.m. Everything is ready. No signature. No explanation. None needed. A faint smile appeared, then disappeared. The timing was finally here. After years of postponing, years of avoiding attention, years of choosing anonymity, the truth would come out tomorrow. Not because she wanted recognition, because certain responsibilities could no longer wait. Meanwhile, rumors continued spreading throughout the building. The mysterious all-hands meeting dominated every conversation. Employees gathered around coffee stations, conference rooms, elevators, everyone guessing, nobody knowing. The theories became increasingly ridiculous. A merger, a bankruptcy, a celebrity investor, a political scandal. The building practically vibrated with speculation. Interesting. Human beings dislike uncertainty. They'd rather believe an unlikely story than admit they don't know the answer. Late that afternoon, Evelyn made her way toward the top floor, the executive level. Most employees rarely visited. Access required special authorization. The hallways looked different there. Quieter, more polished, more expensive. People assumed Evelyn came upstairs to clean. That assumption suited her perfectly. No questions, no attention, no curiosity. As she approached a private office near the corner of the floor, a receptionist smiled. "Good afternoon, Ms. Brooks." Unlike most employees, this woman knew exactly who Evelyn was. The older woman nodded. "Afternoon, Claire." The receptionist lowered her voice. "Nervous about tomorrow?" A small smile appeared. "A little." Claire laughed softly. "So is everyone else." That answer amused Evelyn more than it should have, because the employees downstairs feared losing their jobs. The executives upstairs feared disappointing her. And almost nobody realized they were worrying about the same person. The irony felt almost unbelievable. As evening approached, workers began heading home. Lights shut off one by one. Conversations faded. The tower slowly emptied. Ryan Walker packed his laptop and prepared to leave. Another stressful day. Another unfinished project. Another reason to be irritated. As he passed through the lobby, he noticed Evelyn mopping near the entrance. For a moment, guilt surfaced. Briefly, then disappeared. He considered apologizing. Instead, he kept walking. Some opportunities only knock once. Ryan didn't know it yet, but by tomorrow morning, he'd wish he had taken that chance. Because less than 18 hours remained before the biggest announcement in company history. And when the truth finally appeared on the screen, an entire building would realize they had spent 30 years overlooking the most important person among them. By 7:30 Friday morning, the entire building felt different. Not quieter. Tense. The kind of tension people bring into a room when nobody knows what's coming. Employees arrived earlier than usual. Coffee disappeared faster. Conversations happened in whispers. Every elevator ride carried the same question. What was the meeting about? Nobody had an answer. At least not one they could prove. Interesting. Because uncertainty creates stories. And office workers are exceptionally talented storytellers. By 7:45, the main atrium had begun filling. The space stretched nearly 3 stories high. Glass walls, marble floors, a massive presentation screen hanging above the central stage. Normally people rush through this area without stopping. Today almost everyone gathered there. Lawyers, accountants, analysts, receptionists, executives, interns, hundreds of employees. All waiting, all guessing. Ryan Walker stood near the middle of the crowd. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other. His eyes looked tired. The previous night hadn't gone well. Sleep had been difficult, for reasons he couldn't fully explain. Interesting. The guilt from his interactions with Evelyn had lingered longer than expected. Not enough to keep him awake all night, but enough to make him uncomfortable. Every now and then he found himself replaying those conversations. The elevator, the hallway, the cleaning cart. Her response, "Have a good evening, son." The memory bothered him, more than it should have. Across the room, Frank the security guard leaned against a column, watching the crowd, watching the rumors spread in real time. He found it amusing. People who claimed to understand everything suddenly understood nothing. That happened more often than most executives realized. At precisely 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. Conversation stopped almost immediately. The room fell silent. A few seconds later, CEO Martin Hayes stepped onto the stage. The reaction was immediate. Employees straightened. Phones disappeared. Attention focused forward. Martin rarely addressed the entire company personally. When he did, people listened. The CEO adjusted the microphone, then smiled. Not the polished smile people expected. Something more genuine, more emotional. Interesting. Several executives seated near the front looked unusually nervous. That detail did not go unnoticed. Martin glanced around the room, then began. Thank you all for being here. A pause. I know there's been a lot of speculation. Light laughter moved through the crowd. The tension eased slightly. Only slightly. The CEO continued. For the past 30 years, this building has been home to thousands of people. Heads nodded. The statement felt obvious. Yet Martin's tone suggested something deeper. Something important. Many of you have built careers here. Another pause. Some have built families here. The room remained quiet. Others discovered opportunities they never expected. Interesting. People began listening differently. Less curiosity. More attention. Because this no longer sounded like a merger announcement. Or layoffs. Or retirement. Martin took a breath. Then continued. Today, we are officially announcing a leadership transition regarding ownership of the building and our parent company. Immediately the room stirred. Whispers. Quick glances. Raised eyebrows. The rumors exploded again. Only silently this time. Ryan looked toward a coworker. The coworker shrugged. Nobody knew what this meant. Not yet. The CEO raised his hand. The room settled again. There is one thing many of you don't know. His voice softened. A story very few people have heard. Interesting. The executives near the front exchanged looks. Several smiled. Almost proudly. Martin glanced toward the side of the stage. Then back at the audience. 30 years ago, this building was close to failure. Silence. Many employees seemed surprised. The tower now represented one of Chicago's most valuable commercial properties. Failure felt impossible to imagine. Yet Martin continued. The investors left. A pause. The banks lost confidence. Another pause. Most people walked away. The audience listened carefully. Because stories matter. Especially stories involving survival. Then came the sentence nobody expected. One family stayed. The screen behind him illuminated. A black and white photograph appeared. An old photograph. A much younger couple standing outside the building. The tower looked different back then. Smaller. Less impressive. The crowd stared. Trying to understand. Trying to connect the dots. Interesting. Some mysteries become more confusing before they become clear. Martin pointed toward the photograph. Daniel and Evelyn Brooks. Silence. The names meant nothing to most people. At first. Then recognition began spreading. Slowly. A receptionist gasped. Someone near the back frowned. Frank smiled. Ryan felt something strange in his stomach. A feeling he couldn't yet identify. The CEO continued. When others abandoned the property, they invested everything they had. The photograph remained on screen. They believed in this building. A pause. When nobody else did. The room had become completely silent now. Not polite silence. Focused silence. The kind people give when they sense something important approaching. Martin looked toward the audience. Then smiled. After Daniel's passing, ownership transferred entirely to Evelyn Brooks. Several employees frowned. Still not understanding. Still trying to catch up. The CEO nodded toward the screen operator. The photograph disappeared. A new image appeared. One single name. Centered. Large. Impossible to miss. Evelyn Brooks' silence. Complete silence. No whispers. No movement. Nothing. Interesting. Because some truths arrive so unexpectedly that the brain refuses to process them. Several employees looked around. Confused. Ryan stared at the screen. Then stared harder. The name looked familiar. Too familiar. Then realization hit. Hard. Very hard. His coffee nearly slipped from his hand. No way. The words escaped before he could stop them. Across the atrium, similar reactions appeared everywhere. Expressions changed. Eyes widened. People turned. Searching, looking, trying to find her. The same question moved through the crowd. Not spoken. Instinctive. Where is she? Martin smiled softly, then pointed toward the back of the room. Hundreds of heads turned at once. And there she stood, near the last row, wearing the same maintenance uniform, the same comfortable shoes, the same gentle expression. No designer clothing, no security team, no executive entourage. Just Evelyn, the woman who emptied trash cans, the woman who cleaned break rooms, the woman many employees barely noticed. Interesting, because the truth hadn't changed her. It changed them. The room remained frozen. Nobody knew whether to clap, speak, move, or apologize. Ryan felt his face go pale, because suddenly every careless word came rushing back. Every dismissive glance, every rude comment, every opportunity he had wasted. And the worst part? Evelyn wasn't looking angry. She was smiling, the same way she always smiled. Then Martin spoke again, and what he said next would leave the entire building speechless. Then Martin spoke again, and what he said next left the entire building speechless. The truth is, the CEO paused. His eyes moved toward Evelyn, then back to the crowd. Evelyn Brooks could have stopped working here decades ago. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every employee remained focused on the stage, trying to understand, trying to catch up, trying to reconcile two completely different versions of the same woman. The janitor, the owner. Interesting, because people don't struggle with the truth. They struggle with the gap between what they believed and what was real. Martin continued. When Daniel and Evelyn invested in this building 30 years ago, nobody thought it would survive. The old photograph returned to the screen. Daniel stood beside a younger Evelyn, both smiling, both hopeful, both carrying dreams nobody else could see. The property was losing money. A pause. Businesses were leaving. Another pause. Most investors considered it a lost cause. The audience listened carefully. The story felt almost impossible. This tower now dominated part of the Chicago skyline. Employees fought for jobs here. Companies competed for office space. Yet once upon a time, nobody wanted it. Interesting. Success has a strange habit. People only remember it after it arrives. Martin pointed toward the photograph. Evelyn and Daniel mortgaged nearly everything they owned. A few employees exchanged surprised looks. The CEO nodded. Everything. No exaggeration. No dramatic language. Just facts. And somehow facts carried more weight. Especially facts involving sacrifice. The room remained silent. Even Ryan. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about Evelyn. The woman he had dismissed. The woman he barely acknowledged. The woman whose story he had never cared enough to ask about. A knot formed in his stomach. Interesting. Regret often arrives after understanding. Never before. Martin continued. Years later, when the building finally became successful, Daniel and Evelyn had a choice. A pause. They could have sold. Another pause. They could have retired. The crowd nodded. That made sense. Most people would, especially after decades of hard work. Yet Martin smiled. They didn't. The audience looked confused again. Several employees frowned. Why wouldn't they? Why continue? Why stay? The CEO seemed to know exactly what everyone was thinking, because he asked the same question. Do you know what Evelyn told me when I first became CEO? He looked toward her. The older woman smiled softly. The same calm smile everyone had seen for years. Martin laughed, then repeated her answer. She said, this building was never about money. Silence. Interesting, because nobody expected that answer. Not from a major owner. Not from someone who could have spent decades enjoying wealth. Martin continued. She told me this building was about people. The words landed heavily, especially among employees, because many of them had never considered that possibility. To them, the tower represented work, paychecks, deadlines, promotions, business. To Evelyn, it represented lives, families, dreams, opportunities, human beings. A very different perspective. The CEO stepped away from the podium. More relaxed now, more personal. For 30 years, Evelyn chose to stay. He looked around the room. Not because she needed the paycheck. A pause. Because she wanted to know the people inside this building. The audience grew quieter. If that was even possible. Martin smiled. You thought she was cleaning offices. Light laughter spread through the crowd. The nervous kind. The embarrassed kind. The CEO continued. Meanwhile, She was learning your names. More silence. Remembering your children. Another pause. Praying for family members. When they were sick, heads slowly lowered throughout the room. Because many people suddenly remembered things. Small things. Forgotten things. Moments they never connected. The receptionist whose mother had undergone surgery. The accountant whose husband battled cancer. The attorney who lost his father. The intern who couldn't afford lunch. Interesting. The pieces were beginning to fit together. And once they did, the picture became impossible to ignore. Martin gestured toward the audience. How many of you have been helped by Evelyn? For a moment, nobody moved. Then a hand rose. Near the middle, another followed. Then another. And another. Soon dozens of hands filled the air. A murmur moved through the room. Because nobody realized how many lives she had touched. Not until that moment. Not until they could actually see it. Interesting. Kindness often works quietly. Years can pass before anyone notices its impact. Ryan stared around the atrium. His chest felt tight. Because while everyone else remembered moments of generosity, he remembered something else. His own behavior. The elevator. The hallway. The disrespect. The opportunities he wasted. And suddenly those memories felt much larger. Much uglier. Across the room, Frank smiled proudly. None of this surprised him. Not really. He'd seen Evelyn helping people for years. Most simply hadn't paid attention. Martin finally returned to the microphone, then delivered the sentence that changed the atmosphere entirely. There's one more thing. The audience immediately focused again. Another surprise? Apparently. The CEO nodded toward Evelyn. For years, she asked us to keep her ownership private. A pause. We honored that request. Then his expression softened. But this year, she made a different decision. Interesting. Very interesting. Because now everyone wanted to know why. Why reveal the truth now? After 30 years? After decades of anonymity? Martin answered before anyone could ask. Evelyn believes it's time to step back. A collective sigh moved through the room. Some looked sad. Others shocked. A few appeared emotional. The realization hit hard. This wasn't just an announcement. It was the end of an era. The end of a chapter. The end of something people hadn't fully appreciated until it was almost gone. Martin smiled. But before she does, he looked toward Evelyn. There's something she wants to say. The room froze. Completely. Every eye turned toward the back. Toward the woman in the maintenance uniform. Toward the woman who had quietly walked these hallways for 30 years. Toward the woman who owned everything around them. Slowly, Evelyn stepped forward. No dramatic music. No grand entrance. No change of clothes. She still wore the same uniform. The same shoes. The same gentle smile. And somehow, that made the moment even more powerful. As she approached the stage, hundreds of employees rose to their feet. One after another. Without being asked. Without being told. The applause started softly. Then grew louder. And louder. And louder. Many employees were clapping for the owner. But deep down, they were clapping for something much bigger. Character. Grace. 30 years of quiet kindness. Ryan felt tears forming unexpectedly. Because for the first time, he understood exactly who Evelyn Brooks was. And he wasn't the only one. The applause continued as Evelyn reached the microphone. Then the room fell silent. She smiled, looked across the crowd, and opened her mouth to speak. She smiled, looked across the crowd, and finally spoke. Good morning, everyone. Her voice sounded exactly the same. The same voice employees had heard in hallways, in elevators, in break rooms. The same voice that wished people luck before presentations. The same voice that remembered birthdays. The same voice most people had never truly listened to. Interesting. Because people often hear someone for years before they actually hear them. The room remained silent. Hundreds of employees stood frozen, waiting, listening. Evelyn glanced around the atrium. Her eyes moved across familiar faces. Some embarrassed, some emotional, some completely stunned. 30 years of memories seemed to pass through her expression. Then she smiled again, a little wider this time. I've spent most of my life in this building. A pause. And most of that time, people assumed I worked here. Light laughter rippled through the crowd. Nervous laughter. Relieved laughter. The kind that appears when people don't know whether to cry. Evelyn nodded. The funny thing is, a pause. They were right. The audience laughed again. Even Martin Hayes smiled. Interesting. Because humility becomes powerful when someone has every reason to be proud. Evelyn rested her hands on the podium. Not like an owner. Not like a billionaire. Like a grandmother talking to family. I never considered myself above anyone here. The room quieted immediately. Not 30 years ago. A pause. Not today. Another pause. And not tomorrow. Several employees lowered their eyes. Because they suddenly realized they had done exactly that. They had ranked people. Categorized them. Measured worth through job titles. Office locations. Paychecks. Without ever meaning to. Interesting. The most powerful lessons rarely arrive as accusations. They arrive as reflections. Evelyn continued. When Daniel and I invested in this building, we weren't investing in concrete. A pause. We were investing in people. The words landed softly, yet somehow carried enormous weight. She looked toward the back rows, toward the younger employees, the interns, the receptionists, the security staff, the people most often overlooked. I believed every person who walked through these doors mattered. Her eyes moved across the room, and I still do. Silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Respectful silence. The kind people choose. Ryan felt his throat tighten, because for the first time in his career, he wasn't thinking about promotions, or bonuses, or performance reviews. He was thinking about character, and he didn't like what he saw. Evelyn smiled gently. As for owning the building, a small shrug. It was never the most important thing about me. Interesting. Very interesting. Because the entire audience had spent the last hour believing ownership was the revelation. Now she was telling them it wasn't. The older woman looked toward Martin, then toward Frank, then toward dozens of familiar faces. The most important thing was getting to know you. Several people wiped away tears. Not dramatic tears. Real ones. The kind people try to hide. The kind that arrive when they realize they've misunderstood someone. For years. Then Evelyn took a slow breath and delivered the sentence many would remember for the rest of their lives. A title doesn't make someone valuable. The room became perfectly still. Character does. Silence. Complete silence. Nobody checked a phone. Nobody whispered. Nobody moved. Because everyone knew she was right. Interesting. Truth often becomes powerful when spoken by someone who never needed to prove anything. Evelyn stepped away from the podium, then surprised everyone. She looked directly into the audience, searching, until her eyes landed on Ryan Walker. The young analyst immediately froze. His stomach dropped, not because she looked angry, because she didn't. That somehow felt worse. Evelyn smiled, the same patient smile she had always given him. Then she spoke. Ryan. The entire room turned toward him. Every head, every eye. Ryan wanted to disappear. Immediately. Completely. Slowly he stood. Embarrassment washed over him. His face burned. He expected criticism. Expected humiliation. Expected accountability. Instead, Evelyn asked a simple question. How's that client presentation going? The room fell silent again. Ryan stared, unable to speak. She remembered. Out of thousands of employees, she remembered. Interesting. Because kindness remembers people long after pride forgets them. Ryan swallowed hard, then finally managed an answer. Better. His voice cracked. Embarrassingly. Honest. Much better. Evelyn nodded. I'm glad. That was it. No lecture. No revenge. No public embarrassment. Just grace. And somehow grace hurt more than punishment. Ryan slowly sat down. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time in his adult life, he understood what respect actually looked like. The applause began before anyone realized it. One person, then another, then dozens more. Soon the entire atrium erupted. People stood, clapped, cheered, not because she owned the building, because she had shown them something bigger, something rare, something worth admiring. Character. The standing ovation lasted nearly 3 minutes. When it finally ended, employees lined up to speak with Evelyn. Some apologized. Some thanked her. Some simply introduced themselves properly for the first time. Interesting. The woman they had overlooked for decades suddenly became the person everyone wanted to know. Yet nothing about Evelyn changed. Not one thing. The following Monday morning, employees arrived expecting something different. Maybe a retirement announcement. Maybe a farewell ceremony. Maybe an empty hallway. Instead, they found Evelyn exactly where she had always been, pushing her cleaning cart, moving through the building, smiling, working. A young attorney stopped. Ms. Brooks, you don't have to do that anymore. Evelyn laughed softly. I know. Then continued down the hallway. Interesting. Because she had never done it because she had to. She did it because she wanted to. Weeks passed. then months. The culture inside the building slowly changed. People greeted security guards by name. Employees thanked maintenance workers. Managers spoke differently to receptionists. Small things, simple things, yet meaningful, because respect often begins in ordinary moments. One afternoon, Ryan passed Evelyn near the elevator. This time he stopped first. "Good afternoon, Ms. Brooks." She smiled. "Good afternoon, Ryan." The young analyst hesitated, then finally said the words he'd waited months to say. "I'm sorry." A pause. "For all of it." Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, then smiled. "I know. Nothing more. Nothing less." And somehow that was enough. Years later, many employees would forget financial reports, quarterly earnings, business strategies, corporate announcements, but they never forgot Evelyn Brooks, the elderly black woman who cleaned offices for 30 years. Then everyone learned she owned the building. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. The biggest surprise was discovering that the most powerful person in the building had also been the kindest. And in the end, that was the legacy she cared about most.